Welcome, distinguished leaders who are here, partners, colleagues, friends, Godney Institute, my brother Linus and your wife. Good morning once again. I want you to stay with me because I'm giving 30 minutes to do a keynote. And I think this is part of the framing of the conversation this morning. So please stay with me as we go through this. It is with profound honor to join you today at the National Leadership Conference 2025 under a theme that could not be more urgent nor more inspiring: transforming minds, inspiring results. Let me begin by commending the conveners for this vision. For in times like these, times of great disruption and possibility, it is leadership and leadership alone that makes a difference between nations that rise and nations that stumble. We gather here in Abuja at the heart of Africa's largest democracy, not just to talk about leadership in theory, but ask ourselves the hard question: what kind of leadership will transform Nigeria, and through Nigeria, Africa, and by extension, the world? And I will submit to you this morning that the answer begins not with resources, not with policies, not even institutions, but something much deeper: the mind. Every transformation in human history, whether of nations, or organizations, or communities, has begun first with the transformation of thinking. If the mind is trapped, the nation is trapped. If the mind is free, the nation sorrows. Let me begin by talking a bit about the context that we are in today, the world that Nigeria and by extension Africa must navigate. It's important that as we talk about leadership, we also talk about the context that we are in today. Friends, let us first pause and look around us, because Nigeria does not exist in isolation. It exists in a world that is moving, a world that is shifting, and sometimes trembling under its own feet. We live in a world of deep uncertainty. Wars in Europe, the Middle East, and Africa are redrawing global alliances, disrupting trade, and testing global governance. The global economy is volatile. Interest rates are rising, debt burdens are mounting, and developing countries, Nigeria amongst them, are squeezed between domestic needs and external pressures. The climate crisis is accelerating. Temperatures are rising. Droughts and floods are intensifying. Nigeria is losing billions every year to climate shocks, from desertification in the north to flooding in the Niger Delta. Lake Chad, which once sustained 90 million people, has shrunk by 90%. We live in a world of demographic transformation. That's part of the context I'm setting. Africa will account for 1 in every 4 human beings by 2050. Nigeria, already home to more than 220 million people, will exceed 400 million in the next 25 years. This is both extraordinary opportunity and an extraordinary risk. A young population can be a powerful driver of growth, or a time bomb of frustration and instability. That is the context that we are in. Are you following me? Stay with me on the conversation, because leadership is not discussed in a vacuum. I'm trying to frame where we are today in the world. We also live in a world of technological revolution. Artificial intelligence, and I think a few days ago we were hosting DITEX here, talking about artificial intelligence, robotics, biotechnology, quantum computing. These are not futuristic concepts. They are here, disrupting jobs, reshaping industries, and redefining what competitiveness means. Nigeria has millions of internet users, one of the highest in the world, yet the gap between connectivity and productivity remains wide. What is the other context that we are setting? We are part of the complex world of minerals and geopolitics. Across our continent today, minerals are not just commodities. They are strategic assets shaping the geopolitics of our time. The batteries that power electric cars, the chips that run your smartphones, the grids that sustain renewable energy, All depend on cobalt, lithium, copper, and rare earth. From the Great Lakes region to the Lobito corridor, we see how global competition is intensifying around these resources, and similar dynamics are emerging in West Africa. For Nigeria, this is both an opportunity and a challenge to ensure that our mineral wealth does not fuel conflict or exploitation, but instead powers inclusive growth, technological advancement, and energy security for the future. And finally, we live in a world of contested influence. Nations are competing not only with their economies and militaries, but with their ideas, their values, and their narratives. Leadership today is no longer about territory alone. It is about influence. So this is the context that Nigeria must navigate. And the truth is simple. Business as usual is not an option. Now let me segue into the power of transformed minds, because that is the subject of the conversation today. What makes the difference between nations that thrive in this uncertain world that I described and nations that struggle? It is not size. It is not natural resources. It is not even geography. It is mindset. Let us look at history. What is history telling us? Singapore under Lee Kuan Yew was dismissed as a swamp with no resources, no hinterland, no hope. But Lee Kuan Yew shifted the national mindset towards discipline, meritocracy, and long-term planning. Today, Singapore is one of the wealthiest nations on earth. And I must say that UNDP was part of Singapore's legacy and history as well, because some of the finest development economies that we had also accompanied them in their history. Botswana and the Seretse Khama discovered diamonds, but unlike many resource-rich countries, avoided extensively the curse. Why? The resource curse. Because leadership chose prudence over plunder, invested in education and institutions, and built trust. Today, Botswana is one of Africa's strongest economies, albeit with some challenges, and most stable economies. South Korea, we always talk about South Korea, in the 1960s was poorer than many African nations, including my own country, which was richer than South Korea per GDP at the time. But leadership transformed the national psyche, moving from dependency to self-reliance, from imitation to innovation. Today, South Korea is a technology powerhouse, home to Samsung, Hyundai, LG, and many more. Rwanda, after the genocide in 1994, was a broken nation, but by embedding values of unity, integrity, and service delivery, Rwanda has become a model of resilience and innovation on the continent. And here in Nigeria, we are also home. We see it too. Look at our fintech revolution. Young Nigerians refuse to be limited by the lack of infrastructure. They harness mobile technology, digital platforms, and sheer determination to build companies like Flutterwave, Paystack, MoneyPoint, and many more. Today, thank you. Today, Nigerian fintech powers billions of dollars in transactions, not only here in Nigeria, but across Africa and globally. The lesson is very clear. Development is not about what is in your ground. It is about what is in your mind. So let me now talk about leadership as influence beyond power. If mindset is the engine of transformation, then leadership is the driver. I want to repeat that. If mindset is the engine of transformation, then leadership is the driver. But let me be clear. Leadership in the 21st century is not about position. It is not about titles. It is not about raw materials. It is not about raw power. Leadership is about influence. Influence that comes from trust. Influence that comes from credibility. Influence that comes from delivery. Think about it. Mo Ibrahim, through his foundation and governance index, has influenced how we measure leadership in Africa more than many heads of states. Our own Ngozi Iweala-Okonjo, by the quality of her service and vision, now shapes global trade as Director General of the World Trade Organization. Across the world, mayors, governors, entrepreneurs, artists, even activists are exercising leadership through influence, not just authority. The truth is, institutions outlast individuals. Leaders who build strong systems, who create space for others, who institutionalize excellence, those are the leaders whose legacies endure. Nigeria must aspire to lead in ideas, to lead in governance and innovation. That is the path to real global influence. This is already happening. We need to step it up. So what are some of the pathways to Nigeria's transformation? As the subject matter is also about transformation. So how does Nigeria, at this critical crossroads, translate mindset into results? Let me suggest a few leadership imperatives. 1, reimagining governance. Nigeria must move from transactional leadership to transformational leadership. Building institutions that outlast electoral cycles. Strengthen rule of law, accountability and trust. Tackle short-termism and invest in long-term national vision. The second thing is youth and demographic dividend. Nigeria's greatest asset is not oil, and we've always heard even the leadership of this country talk about it. Not gas, it is its people, especially youth. 70% of Nigeria's youth are under 30. This is potential dynamism. Invest in education that equips them not only for yesterday's job, but for today and for tomorrow's economy. Support youth entrepreneurship, particularly in digital and creative economies. Nigeria's music, film, and tech are already global. Afrobeats is playing in New York, London, Tokyo, and many other places. Nollywood films are streamed on Netflix. The challenge is to scale this influence into industrial power. 3, energy transition. Nigeria stands at the heart of Africa's energy future. Gas must be used as a transition fuel. Renewables, solar, hydro, wind must be the long-term bet. Strategic minerals like our lithium in Nasarawa should come into the energy mix. Leadership must set a clear path, transcending oil and leading Africa into the clean energy future. Number 4, digital and innovation leadership. The 4th industrial revolution is here with us. Nigeria must not be a consumer of technology, including AI. It must be a producer. Build ecosystem on artificial intelligence, biotech, green tech, fintech, incentivize research, innovation, and startups. And finally, on development finance and partnerships. Nigeria cannot transform alone. Mobilize domestic resources effectively, harness private sector and diaspora capital, leverage the Africa Continental Free Trade Area for regional trade and investment. The point is simple. Nigeria's pathway to transformation is largely a matter of our collective and individual mindset. The leadership styles we espouse in business, the leadership styles we espouse in government, the leadership styles we espouse in civil society, etc. Number 6, as I try to wind down, I want to touch a bit about some of the lessons, leadership lessons, what I call fire in the belly. Permit me to share a personal reflection myself. During my tenure leading the United Nations Development Program, UNDP, in Uganda, we faced overlapping crises, COVID-19, Ebola, climate shocks, global inflation, even conflicts far beyond Africa that deepen suffering at home. In those moments, I learned something profound. Leadership is not about predicting the storm. Leadership is about finding fire in your belly to keep running, to keep innovating, and to keep inspiring even in times of uncertainty. We were able to sustain business continuity even with the second longest lockdown in the world's history, over 2 years. The tourism sector, which was a leading contributor of gross domestic product, was badly hit. We harnessed technology, culture, and nature to rebuild the sector, and is thriving today. We were confronted by Ebola. We curtailed it in the shortest record time in history, harnessing cultural institutions, media, and local governance. This is what Nigeria needs today. Leaders across government, private sector, academia, and civil society. Leaders with fire in their belly. Leaders who act not only when conditions are perfect, but especially when they are not. So what is the call to action? The leadership beyond limits. Friends, as we close, let me leave you with this thought. The future we seek for Nigeria is not a distant dream. It is within our reach if we choose to lead differently. Leadership is not about position or privilege. It is about responsibility. It is about seeing further, acting boldly, and inspiring thrust. So I invite you to carry 3 commitments as you leave this hall. Think differently, because transformation begins in the mind. Act decisively, because the world will not wait for us. Inspire results, because true leadership is measured not by promises. True leadership is measured not by promises, but by impact and results. Thank you. If each of us, in our own space, lives out of this commitment, then together we will shape a Nigeria defined not by limits, but by possibilities. A Nigeria where service defines leadership. A Nigeria where innovation drives growth. A Nigeria where development impact is collectively recognized and valued. So when we say a Nigeria where innovation drives growth, let us make it real. And I want to make it real. Imagine Aba in Abia State, Lagos, Kano, Onitsha, Ogun, transformed into ultra-modern industrial clusters. Factories humming with smart technology, supply chains integrated across Africa, and markets that set the pace for global trade. Imagine it. Imagine universities across this country, not just as centers of learning, but as innovation engines producing solutions for agriculture, health, fintech, green energy, and directly linked to industry. Envision a Nigeria whose creative economy, music, film, fashion, digital art rivals the world's biggest, and whose renewable energy hubs light up communities and power industries from Sahel to the coast. This is the Nigeria we can build. Africa's economic tiger, driven not by chance, but by deliberate leadership and inspired results. This is urgent. It is possible. And it begins with us, all of us here and now. Once again, thank you for listening to me.